underneath this screen, so hopefully you can see them okay. Our next panel is Farm to Public Institution, talking about how to engage as a small grower. So we have a representative from Wisconsin's Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, April Yancer, Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, Brittany Zerbe, and Wisconsin Department of Health Services, Jennifer Putzer. They're here to talk about how their work at government agencies isn't just as a regulator, but how they can collaborate with individuals, organizations across Wisconsin to support community wellness through local food. I am going to let them give some more in-depth introductions into them and their programs, and then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. And if no one has a question, I have some prepared to get the crowd going. So Jennifer, I'll pass it off to you.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm really happy to be here. My name is Jennifer Putzer. As Aiden just said, I come from DHS, and I oversee programs that are related to food security work. I work with CSFP, which is the Stockbox Commodity Supplemental Food Program for seniors. I work with TFAP, so I work pretty extensively with food pantries in the Emergency Food Assistance Program. And then I work with the Farmers Market Nutrition Programs, both WIC and Senior. And so I'm really open to all sorts of different questions today, but I think I'm here to kind of relate to the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, because I think that would be most directly related to this group, but also our TFAP program, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, and how farmers can connect with food banks and food pantries.
Hi, everyone. I'm April Yancer. I'm the Farm to School and Institution Program Specialist at DATCAP, which is the Department of Trade, the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And so that's to say that DATCAP is a very large organization, and we cover a lot on anything that has to do with any of those topics. And there's a lot of regulation areas. And then I work in the Division of Ag Development on the Economic Development and Innovation team, which is a team of 4 to 6 people that specifically focus in supporting producers and processors in market expansion, production expansion. And then the area of work where I come in on that team is I work with those folks and then help figure out how the producers that we support can sell into schools, food security outlets, daycare facilities, healthcare programs, et cetera. So thanks for having me today.
Hi, I'm Brittany Zerbe. I work with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, specifically supporting school nutrition directors and trying to get more food into our school nutrition programs. I'll give kind of a brief overview of our nutrition programs, as I know that's a mystery, I think, a lot of what happens there. So I have a few notes I'll just walk through here quickly. So yes, at Wisconsin DPI, we go by DPI for short. We support the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program, which is run in public and private schools throughout Wisconsin, and we cover the whole state with those programs. We also support the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, which is a snack program that happens in some of our schools. It's a grant that they apply for. And then we also have members that support the Child and Adult Care Food Program and the Summer Food Service Program. Child and Adult Care Food Program typically runs in like daycare centers or in-home daycare. There's also a kind of a sector of that works in at-risk programs, so like Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, doing like after-school snacks and suppers. And then that summer food service program is run usually in K through 12 schools, although that also can happen in like YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs during the summer months when school is out of session. So we receive funding for these programs from USDA, so a federal funding source. USDA establishes what are called meal pattern guidelines, the reimbursement rates, these types of things. And then we as a state agency administer those programs. So we're responsible for making sure that those federal regulations and funds are distributed to those programs, are those sites that offer these programs. Sites receive this federal funding based on the number of meals they serve. And that funding is going to differ Each program has a different reimbursement rate, we call it, or kind of rate per meal. And then, various sites serve a differing amount of meals. So the number or the amount of funding that we distribute on a monthly basis to each site will really vary. Meals are reimbursed if they meet those, what I mentioned earlier, federal meal pattern requirements. So schools are required to serve certain meal components, basically food groups, we call them components, and certain portion sizes to students or children in order to receive their monthly reimbursement. Schools are subject to certain procurement requirements as when they participate in our programs. For local purchases, though, a lot of times these fall within what we call a micro purchase threshold. So if a school purchases under $15,000 through you, they don't have to follow all the typical requests for bid and doing a formal contract and all of that and all that piece. Our schools purchase in all kinds of food groups, so dairy, meat proteins, fruits, vegetables, and grains. So there's a lot of opportunity beyond just produce to sell to schools. To access the school market, Sarah talked greatly about this, but you can either sell directly to a school. We do recommend you have previous wholesale experience if you go that route, or selling through a food hub or local aggregator is a great way to reach schools as well. When you approach a school, schools may ask about your licensing or certification requirements. I have some resources up on that front table, and one of those is called Selling to Schools Licensing Requirements in a Nutshell. So in that document, we've gone through and we have for each different food group the certain licensing requirements that a school would require in order to purchase food from you. GAP certification is not required from the state level, but schools may have stricter requirements, which could include GAP. I'm not seeing that a lot, but just know that these would just be the minimum state requirements that would be mandated for each of those food components or groups. And then to connect with schools, one resource I always like to highlight is our Wisconsin Local Foods database. This is a database that has an Excel spreadsheet of farmers and producers looking to sell to schools. It's free to add yourself to, so you can, there's another handout on the front table here with a QR code. Scan that, and it'll bring you to the site where you can request to be added to our database. And when you're in that Excel spreadsheet, our schools can go there, find your contact information, what kind of products you offer, delivery, all that information, and helps them connect with you. On the flip side of that, we also have a school database, which lists out schools who voluntarily added themselves to this database saying, I want to buy a local product. And they'll include what kind of things they're looking for in that database, so you can use that list to reach out to schools as the farmer or producer. A couple other things I'll highlight. There is a QR code to our Harvest Highlights newsletter. This will be going out on a quarterly basis in 2026, but we'll keep you up to date on things that are happening through DPI to support farm-to-school work. I also have a QR code to our statewide information sessions for farm-to-school and farm-to-early care and education. Those will also be happening quarterly in 2026. And there'll be a space where you can come and hear not just from DPI, but from DATCAP, WICA, Catherine's on our calls. We have Kids Forward and Health Tide. We have DHS as well, staff. So just a lot of different partners in our state that share what work they're doing, so you can stay most up to date on funding and projects and grant opportunities, etc. Thank you.
So I'll hop in again here. So that's a lot of wonderful information that Brittany shared. And each program runs a little bit differently, and there's a lot to navigate if you're selling to a DPI school district, if you're selling to a daycare, if you're selling to a food security outlet. And so if as a small farmer or as a producer or someone who's selling food, you can reach out directly to me and we can have a phone call, we can meet in person, we can hop on a a Zoom or a Teams meeting, and we can just talk through what your specific situation is. So every farm is resourced differently, has different product, has a different distribution area, has different barriers. And so we can just sit down and talk about all of those things, what the goals of your business are, and I can help you connect with people in your community or aggregators or a regulator who might be able to answer really specific questions for you. But I'm available to help small farmers navigate some of this. And I mean, Brittany and I talk on a pretty regular basis, and I'm still like, how does this work again? So it is a lot to figure out and keep in mind, especially if you're new to selling to an institution. So I would really encourage small farmers just to reach out directly for technical assistance, and I can help you connect with what you're looking for, and also kind of evaluate. You might get partway into that conversation and realize, like, I don't want to put in a bid. I don't really have that much product. This actually seems like more work than I really want to incorporate into my business at this time. But then we can explore other avenues that might be more in line with your business goals and aspirations. So maybe selling to Hunger Task Force, or I just said that because you guys are in the room, in the back of the room. But there might be other options that might be a better fit. And so I can help small producers figure that piece out as well.
Okay, I have a couple of questions prepared from the conference planning committee if there's nothing yet from the audience. If not, ruminate on you got one already. Okay, Julie, I'll bring it over to you.
Just a quick question about April, about what you were saying is this farmers that can call and ask questions of technical assistance. Do you have non-English speaking people that can help, like say Spanish speakers or mom farmers?
At DATCAP, we have in our regulatory programs, there are people who are bilingual or can connect to a language line for anything that's regulatory. For agricultural development, we do not have those resources within our team. But I definitely would encourage people to reach out. And then there are people within our community, like you, like other certain aggregators might have bilingual staff. So I can do my best to try to connect people with those resources. But that definitely has been a barrier over the past few years. I mean, definitely since I've been at DATCAP, for people who are not using English as a first language and in accessing some of these markets. So the more organizations that are available to support those farmers, the better positioned we all are. So I would definitely encourage conversation around how do we improve that piece of our food system? How do we financially support organizations like REAP who are trying to figure out that piece? I definitely see it as an under-resourced area of our food system.
Thank you.
And Julie kind of grabbed what our first question was going to be also, which is what support do you have available for farmers of color and farmers that speak English as a second language? And so I'm going to extend that also to Jennifer and Brittany in terms of connecting with DHS and DPI.
I think, as I mentioned initially, all my programs are kind of small, so that also means our federal funding is not very large. But we do make it a priority to try to have services for folks who English is not their first language. So with the farmers market program, we have to base it off of our demographics of our farmers. And so currently within our FMMP program, we have about 1,000 farmers. So it's a lot. And within that, our demographics are Hmong, Spanish, and English speaking. And Hmong is the second to English speaking. So we first, because of funding, translated what we could into Hmong, which is also challenging because of the way the language portrays speaking versus on paper. But then we also have some materials in Spanish. It is limited right now. We are in the process of modernizing the program. Is anybody in the room FMMP farmer, of authorized farmer? Oh, nice. So when you're when you're in the program, if you're in the program, you know we're modernizing the program. So we currently hand out paper checks, and that's what our participants use and hand to the farmers. We're in the process of, we have a QR code on those checks now. So now farmers can use an app to receive the checks to then get reimbursed electronically. Sort of going a little off topic here, but my point is we get funding to modernize from the Biden administration, so with the ARPA funding, but that is now all gone, and we actually received quite a large cut this past year, so our modernizing efforts are stalled, but it is a top priority for us. So we'll continue to do what we can as far as more translation materials for Hmong and Spanish farmers. But we do, as April said, we have a language line, and we also have individuals at our WIC clinics across the state that can personally do training for non-English speaking farmers. So it took me a long time to say that last sentence, I guess, but yeah.
And yes, as another state agency, it's very similar to what April and Jennifer mentioned, but we have the language line. We also work with an agency who translates our resources. So we're actually looking at translating that selling to schools, licensing resource into Spanish and Hmong very soon. And then also just another resource we have about selling to school nutrition directors. And I neglected to mention why, as a farmer, you might reach out to DPI. And again, April said we work very closely. So if April can't answer your question, she'll send you my way too, and vice versa. But a farmer might reach out to us if they are needing some help with crediting their product. That crediting term means basically translating what you're selling to fit the school meal pattern requirements. So I'll use Nico as an example, if you don't mind, Nico. I worked with Blue Farm Chips last year, working to create a product formulation statement. So basically telling schools through a formal document how Blue Farm Chips can fit into their meal patterns and how they can count those as a creditable grain. So if you're looking for assistance in working on getting that information for your product or products, that would be something that I could help you with at DPI. And then yes, if you're looking to connect with like a certain school nutrition director, that information is public, so we could share their contact information or maybe give you some ideas for where you might, network with school nutrition directors in your area. There's a lot of conferences that happen on an annual basis that we could point you to with food shows and things like that. So just a couple of examples of what we could potentially help you with at DPI.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any other questions around the room? Yes. I'm just going to bring this over to your table. Can you say it into the mic so our interpreters can get it?
Do you have then like a database of like the regular pricing based on each school district, or is it a universal pricing of like what they've paid from like past orders on their grain or whatever, their wheat, their chip?
That's a really good question, and it's a hard question to answer. So I will say it varies across the board on what a school nutrition department's budget will be for certain items. The more like a la carte sales they have means they might have more money to spend on local, so they could potentially purchase a little bit, use a little more money to purchase at a higher price. Also, we've heard that like big distributors have varying pricing depending on like the quantity that the district is ordering. So our larger districts might be getting something at a lower price than some of our smaller districts. So all that to say, I don't have a database or like great information, but I'm going to pass it over to April because maybe you have some other thoughts.
I think that question is a question that we get from farmers a lot. Like, what does this market look like? How much food moves through it? What do people get paid for it? How do I fit into it? And I do think that there are organizations across the state that are trying to build that exact set of information. And so, Sam, we can talk directly if you're working on a project that is doing that as well. But I think that that is really, I mean, businesses aren't going to share what they sell things for, right? That's proprietary information that they're going to keep for themselves. But as public institution buyers, we can look at that information because it's public information. And so if we can work together to examine that information and start to see patterns of purchasing prices, that would be a really great goal to get to. And so I do think that there are partners throughout the state that are trying to figure that out and make that available.
Hi. So is most of the products that you buy as an institution raw? Fruits, vegetables, there's chips, obviously, but if we're looking at processed foods or not necessarily like breads or things like that, is there a gap between like that you would buy these kind of locally sourced items if there were, because a lot of us operate under cottage food, which can't be sold to institutions, but if there were then a processing facility that sold locally made bread, would a school be able to buy those kind of items? Like, is there a gap in between processed items and raw items? Because raw you can get directly from the farmer, whereas bread and canned goods or things like that. Is there a gap or is there an opening for that?
I think that there is an opening for, I think we are seeing, obviously, schools have limited resources as well in terms of labor. People who are in food security, who are sourcing through food security programs, may also appreciate having some of their food minimally processed and ready to eat. And so there is a lot happening in the state around the middle of the supply chain. Grace, who's at DATCAP, is here today, and she works in a program that is building up that part of our food chain. But I think like the ability to purchase those things and which institutional program might be willing to or interested in like value-added products really varies based on what their resources are. I do think that obviously we need value-added, minimally processed products in the supply chain. And so I do think there is a market opening up for that. Historically, like we've put our efforts into raw, fresh fruits and vegetables because it's missing in our institutional food outlets. So people want to purchase those things, but we also understand that like not everybody can do something with a butternut squash. They need it cut. And so we have businesses that are building up to serve that need. So I do think that there's opportunity. It's just like fine tuning where that opportunity is for certain products.
Yeah, April said it really well. I would say, yeah, it really will vary on the school, like what they're looking to purchase. A lot of it is like the fruit and vegetables that are like ready to go. A lot of schools now have salad bars. Like Sarah mentioned, it's like so much easier if they can just dump and go versus, you know, spending all the time to peel the carrots and cut the carrots and all this kind of stuff. The other, I know we have like a lot of great dry beans in our state, but schools are, there's been just some work to try to get dry beans into schools for schools to like soak and cook off dry beans when they could open a number 10 can instead. You know, that's a lot easier for them. So they're looking, primarily for convenience and ease. Just a lot of it is because, yeah, they can't find qualified staff. A lot of the staff they're getting into schools, they have no cooking experience. And then, yeah, the cost, they're really limited on the number of hours they can allow their employees to have. A lot of districts cap their employees at a certain number of hours so they don't have to pay them benefits, which is sad, but unfortunately true because it's, a big hit to the budget when you're adding another benefited employee. So they're really limited on their funding and their time to do a lot of that processing on their own. That's not universal across the board. There's some districts who are fantastic and do a lot of that on their own, but a lot of them are in the boat of, we need it quick and easy.
Right. You see the barriers on both ends, right? So from the production end of things, like meeting these price points, getting it minimally processed, getting it through a bid, getting it into a school or into a wholesale outlet. And then on the other end, you have the barriers that Brittany was just describing. And so one thing that we are doing, DPI and DATCAP together, we host marketplace meetings, which are just office hours that we host kind of on an as-needed basis. As we hear people who are interested in looking, we say, oh, there's maybe 20 people who want to come to this meeting, we'll get it going again. But that meeting is really to develop a relationship-based procurement practices, because really where these issues are going to be solved is between the producer and the school food service director. And so if those two partners can get in the same conversation, we can be there for support to help figure out, answer questions as things come up. But when you develop that relationship with your buyer and the school feels like they have a partner to support them in the barriers that they're facing, we see a lot of success in situations where that direct relationship is really strong. Even if you're selling through an aggregator or a distributor, just feeling supported as a school food service director is a really important service that as a producer and somebody who's providing them with product, you can really offer that, and that makes a huge difference.
So I guess my question may be directed towards Jennifer here, but to open up that cottage food conversation, just since I think there are so many of us farmers that are looking at the shelf life of our produce and realizing that if there was a processed product that we could bring to the stores or restaurants or schools, that it may extend some of our produce life. Now, navigating through the challenges of cottage food versus something licensed out of a commercial kitchen that could be sold to a distributor, is there something in between that, to like a cooperative, to where there's been a need for farmers that are all producing similar items that need to be processed in some way? Let's just take cabbage for sauerkraut, just because it's kind of a popular one. What kind of challenges have there been in Wisconsin, and what kind of, has there been any solutions or resources that you guys have been able to offer to pave the way for more of a cooperative effort of food processing and then getting that to an end user, whether it be institution, a regulatory institution, or a school, or even restaurants? And I know farmers markets kind of differ for the laws there, but is there anything that you can speak to on that?
I think this would be more for April. I do work with farmers markets, but again, and to chime into the earlier conversation, the federal regs for FMMP it's just produce in this case. So it's produce and cut herbs for that program. But I think this question would be more geared towards you. Not an FMMP, no.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So, like I said, Grace is here from DATCAP, and she runs our RFSI program, which is a program that has given out $27 million to Wisconsin businesses to build up exactly what you're talking about. That it provides funding. It was a one-time program, so it's not available currently, but it did give out money to get trucks in place, to build facilities, to build that piece from the farmer's kind of truck to the buyer. And so all of that minimally processed equipment and like just facility build out has been included in the RFSI. So there are businesses that are currently looking to do that and may be interested in buying in. I think sauerkraut's a great example. May be interested in buying in cabbage from a producer. Maybe it becomes their product. They minimally process it. They put their label on it. Maybe it's something where it's co-branded with a farmer. I think that there are a lot of interesting ways to do that. And I think that there are some partners we can connect you with if you're, looking to develop that type of partnership with someone.
Does the liability for the farmer get extended
Ye ko yo
through
po
the
hai te ko yo
processing
mu
as
ti
well?
to
Is
chi
there
tin nang
an extra
yo ko
insurance
da
that would have to
yo
be
de
carried if
vegetable na
farmer were to
ta
be
ku to
selling
king na
into as a minimally
ta ku
processed
long ku nu chi yi te ku
product
yo
to
ku yo
another
wa
company
ra chi
to then
ke wa
process
ku
it
la lo na
further?
long la
Is there
dao te ta ku la lo o ke lo je
oh,
se ma
is
ta
there
chi na ku
extended liability to the
wa
farmers if they are doing
wa la lo
minimally
mo wa
processed food and
ku
then
to ku
selling
to ku sa mo
into
wa no se
maybe some
wa
sort
mo
of
de ku
cooperative or
chi
some
ku
sort
to
of company
ye
that is
long ke
processing it further?
mo ho phe de xiong no
Yeah, if you're
ku to
minimally
wo ku to wo ka ka wo
processing
chi pa
your
wo
own
chu
product,
do shi lin da
then you
ka
would have to
ka
be
to chu sa
licensed to
de
do that to
te ku
sell it
yo wo mo le na
into
phao na
another
wo na
business
enter
that
na ku
would
yo
sell
to
it,
nie
right?
do mo le ja
Outside of the
nie to shi mo
cottage
le ja te ku mo
law,
le ja nie de ja
you would have to
nang
be
ja da ja ja la ka
licensed to
ku
do
ga
that. So
ka
another
sha
way
ye ko
around
ha
that
phe
is to
long
say,
de ku chi kyo no la se ku
we'll
to
just sell
la
you
lo
our raw
mo la de ye
product.
you cho
This
long yu ke
company
yu
will
jo na
process
de
it
ke
for us.
yu
They're already
wo la lo
licensed.
the
They're already
ka
covering the
tai de na
liability piece of it. And then maybe putting a label on it, putting your label on it. That might be an option. But I would open it up to anyone else in the room who has more expertise on that.
Coming over.
My name is Julie Knetter, and I own Rock Ridge Orchard, and this was an issue for me originally because I started in my garage, and you're going to hear more about this later. I own an orchard, but we were forced to get a license, a commercial license, because we could not bake in our home, which has subsequently changed. The cottage law is something I adamantly oppose. I don't oppose you as a person or a farmer or a human or anything like that, but it limits my ability, if you know what I mean. My love for baking, for example, like I own a retail store and a bakery and all that, I have to have a license and I have to have liability for anything that I want to send out, like any bakery, to weddings or to funerals or to whatever. So I have to have those things. I also have to have a license. And when the cottage law came into effect, my license went from like 175 to like 900, and now it's going to go up even higher. So so my first response to all of that was to call my health department and say, I no longer want my commercial license. I want my cottage law license, and I'll go back to my home. And they adamantly opposed that because of the volume that I was doing. But yet there's no volume limits. So it's kind of a sticky situation. I would highly encourage you, if you're selling unprocessed stuff, to make sure that you go through your health department, to make sure that you have those stickers on the stuff that you're doing. Like take cider, for example. When I make cider, I make cider. It's raw, right? It's not processed. So it's not good for children under the age of 8. I disagree with that. Although there's bacteria that could hurt somebody under the age of 8 or over the age of 80. Those are the types of things that we put on that. But it has to be done in a licensed kitchen for me right now. Is that? So that's just a different perspective, not a bad or a good or indifferent, but I would like to go back to my house and do bakery, and then I could throw a load of laundry in while I'm doing that and finish my accounting and payroll and all the other stuff I have to do, but we can talk about that too. So thank you.
So I'm going to go back a few questions, sorry. But this question's for DPI. So I was wondering about the LFS program and going to Sam's question about pricing. I just wondered if, even though I know it shifts and like it's very community like driven based on that food service director's budget, but I do wonder if there's data about what people ordered during that program to give some baseline for like, what was bought in, like what was the school looking, or what were these different school districts looking for? How much did they buy? At what price did they buy? And what were the products? So that then at least like while we're having these planning conversations and really thinking about the future, like so that we can see some of the examples that the school districts did, just to build off of that federal, funding that's not here now, which we have to find creative solutions to replace it or to think how we're going to do this. And so I was just wondering if that data exists or if it's accessible.
Absolutely, great question. So yes, we do have an evaluation of the LFS program on our website, and I know Aiden's planning to send out a follow-up email with some links, so I'll send that your way, Aiden. We have like a full 30-page document, and then there's also like kind of a one-pager, and I should have brought that today, so my apologies for the one-pager. But that'll give you some insight on, yes, what types of products were schools purchasing, like where were schools purchasing in our state, these types of things. I'm trying to remember if there is any pricing info in there or not. Do you know offhand? I don't. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I was thinking. I don't think so either. One reason I think that it's not in there, I don't know if I should mention this or not, but I'll be candid. We saw some inflation in prices through the LFS program. Because it was like, yeah, you'll just get the schools got money or producers got money. And so it was like, you could, if the school's going to buy it at that price, like, cool. So that's why I think that data is useful, but do know that I think somewhat realistic or unrealistic in some cases, because it was funding that schools don't normally have. And so they were like, yeah, hey, we'll buy salad at $11 a pound or whatever. And when they wouldn't normally do that with just the reimbursement rates that they typically get. So yeah, I do have my card up here. If you want to chat further and see, yeah, that information is public. I think we can share out anything to my knowledge, but I'll check with our assistant director. But if there's more you're looking for, let me know.
I just wanted to add to that, it was really similar to LFPA where we saw, farmers need a certain price for their product and there's funding that's now available to make it, but those prices aren't necessarily sustainable for the buyer. And so it really opens up a good conversation of fair prices for farmers and what's a sustainable price point for our food security partners and our schools. I do think that there are specific school food service directors that participated in that program that would be happy to partner on a project to share what they spent on food, as well as what they feel like could be sustainable if they could continue to buy those products.
Yeah, and I was just going to be transparent that I also worked on LFPA, and we had a similar, not, inflation. I mean, I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is, we were doing what we knew also was like good for farmers who are learning about selling into wholesale markets, but some of these prices now are not something that we can continue to sustain. And so what is the reality of that, and how do we now go back to the drawing board and learn what can people pay for things, and then do farms want to have either distribution markets, wholesale markets, or do they need to stay in direct markets? So thank you very much.
I think we have about 10 more minutes-ish of questions, so I'll come back here.
I just wanted to go back to the processing and risk management question. I'm with Wisconsin Meadows. We're a marketing cooperative that's beef and pork, but we work with another marketing cooperative in Southwest Wisconsin called Fifth Season Cooperative, who just buys wholesale fruits and vegetables and other things, dairy. They take on the product just similarly to what we do. We buy the product directly from our members, take on the product, the risk, handle all of the risk management aspects. They do the same thing, process the product, freeze it, and sell it out through places like Cisco and other distributors. We do our own self-distribution and then sell through Fortune Fish as our mainline distributor. So it's not, and because we're beef and pork, it's hard for schools and other institutions because usually that pot of money is like schools that buy beef aren't actually buying the beef, they're just buying the processing, and then the USDA reimburses them for the actual cost of the beef. So we're not really price competitive because we actually have to charge for our beef. But that's not the case for specialty products. So entering into a, well, I don't even think Fifth Season needs you to be a member of their cooperative. They might, I'm not sure about the details. But that's an example of a marketing cooperative that takes on the risk by purchasing wholesale produce, processing it, and then handling the reselling to distribution agencies or doing in-house distribution on their own. Fifth season, like FIFTH, it's the idea that you're gleaning or extending your season by processing and freezing.
And Tyler, who works at Fifth Season, is going to be on our panel later today, so he can share some of that information. We have a bunch of panelists for this afternoon who are like kind of rolling in around lunch, so they'll be here. We had another hand over here.
This is another licensing question. Sorry. So minimally processed, is that a different processor's license than maximally processed? Or like,
yeah, there are variations of how processed an item is. And so as soon as you cut it with, like, you could harvest your lettuce from the field, and that's not minimally processed as a full head of lettuce or as mixed greens. But if you chop up that lettuce, then you need a license to do it. So anytime you kind of cut into a product or an apple, then you need licensing for doing that. And depending on the type of processing you're doing, you may need there are different qualifying elements to get licensed to do. So if you're doing meat, if you're fermenting, if you're, everything has like a little bit of a different process. And so that's something you would want to talk to food safety at the Department of Agriculture about.
Just following on the same discussion, if you can look at low-risk foods, which are either dried or just washed, and as she said, don't chop it, don't cut it, then some of these food aggregator concepts work. Just you're spreading the investment of the wash shed, the pack shed. That makes sense. The model where you start getting into high-risk products and cutting, and the infrastructure required to do that is so high, and the labor is also a substantial cost, that people have set up these kitchens thinking it was going to work, and they got grants and they built the facility, but they never had really contracts that would pay for it. And so I really struggled to see that step. And I like the Fifth Season ideas. The aggregators can feed into a processing facility, which is for profit and can sustain a business that way. So just word from the past.
All right, we have about 5 coming over.
Thanks for being here. I think the conversation is great. It's not a licensing question at all. In fact, it might be really steering it differently, but I'm wondering how much you work with Department of Correctional institutions and where does that fit in? My farm is very close to a large prison. So I'm just curious if there's what you can say to that. Are there any programs in Wisconsin where local growers are selling into the prison system, and what might we want to know? And that's it.
Yeah, I work with a few correctional facilities, more in the realm of production, where there's on-site farms, or gardens or something. But yeah, we can talk directly, and I can help connect you.
And that reminds me too, we do have RCCIs, we call them. I believe it stands for residential childcare institutions that participate on the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs. I'm not aware of any that are buying like locally currently, but I could be wrong on that. because I do know we do have a handful that participate. So they potentially would have federal funding that could be used for local product.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Do we have anyone else?
My question is a little more of a broader systems kind of question. We've heard a lot this morning about the barriers that exist for farmers and the barriers that exist for buyers. And yet I've kind of heard a lot of discussion about education, training, and technical assistance specifically geared towards farmers to meet the high demands of buyers. But is there any discussion happening around actually changing the systems that are in place so that farmers have easier access and have an easier time either navigating the bureaucracy and the barriers that exist? Like, is there a meeting in the middle rather than just trying to elevate farmers to the convenience, the pack sizing, the price requirements for all these institutional buyers that are out there?
Yeah, great question. So I know that USDA, who's again setting those regulations for us that we're following at the state level, has been pushing a lot of getting more local product into schools. And the way that they're currently approaching that is changing some of the procurement language that we typically have required to make it easier for local producers to sell into schools. So one way is there's something called the geographic preference, which is now language that schools can add to their prime vendor contract. So typically schools will have one prime vendor they work with that they get the majority of their products through. And so now there's language that they can include that says, hey, we want local, and that can give a local supplier or a distributor who can supply local kind of an edge or an increase in points. So we might call it for scoring to if they're willing to offer local product. So basically it puts to steal Beth Heller's comment or language from Wallow, she typically says we're trying to change from a best price to best value mindset. And so I think we're definitely working towards that with language changes such as this geographic preference language. Additionally, at DPI, we've recently came up with language for schools that have food service management companies to put they want local products incorporated through their food service management company contracts in their contracts when they're doing like a request for bid or request for proposal. So we're trying to make it easier again for schools to say like we don't have to just award our contracts because someone can offer us the best price. We're now looking at more than price. We're also looking at, hey, can you support our local farmers and our local communities? And then we could, that's what we're looking for more to award our contracts, if that makes sense.
I just want to piggyback off of that, even though we're farther away from DPI as the progress goes with purchasing more locally. So the Emergency Food Assistance Program that provides food out to many of our food banks and pantries across the state. We also procure food at that national level. So the state isn't actually looking at the bids. So it's the FNS, Federal Nutrition Services. And there is, by the way, a link and a page for suppliers. So if you are at that level and are interested, you can put in bids at that national level, but we are pushing to get more local food. We do get some local foods, but we do get, at this point, it's still lowest price comes in is what they typically will go for, but just doesn't make sense. We're getting grapes and different things and tomatoes at times of year when the shelf life, is not there. They're being transported way too far. We get them, we have to reject them, then we have waste. So we see that there's issues and are working to correct them. But I know that's not an answer for right now, but just want to let you know that is actually something at the state level that we are concerned about, and so are our partners in other states.
And I'll just add that I feel like those systems changes happen in the relationships between the supply chain partners. So I know I'm looking around the room and I know several of you are working on system change projects with your schools or your food pantries. And then I want to just take a moment to do a shout out about the Farm to School Council. So there are 3 council members in the room, Chang Rai, Catherine, oh, and then Catherine Herlihy was here too, but I think she may have left. One thing that we can do going from grassroots to policy is you can contact your Farm to School Council members and let them know what your priorities are. The Farm to School Council meets quarterly and examines issues or goals of Farm to School in Wisconsin, and they then collectively put forth recommendations to the Department of Agriculture on where the farm to school work that we do should be focused and what should be prioritized. And then those recommendations are sent up to the secretary's office, to the legislators, and that information that comes up through your council members informs our legislative efforts or our biannual budgets, what gets put in. So I would definitely encourage you to get to know your farm to school council members and let them know what policy changes you hope that we can achieve within the state. And then to also, there are food councils throughout the state that are really actually becoming stronger and stronger as the past couple years have gone, and they're working on policy changes at a community level, at a county level, and the more information that gets to us through your council members at your farm to school council members, the more those activities can inform state policy.
Thank you so much. That brings us to kind of